It's amazing to me that just in a few years' time, it's now considered misinformation to talk about the Nazis in Ukraine. This is an extremely concerning situation. I don't think anyone in the United States government, Americans, do not support actual Nazis or white supremacists. I know I certainly do not. And I can't understand why in just a short amount of time, this information that our own American media frequently talked about is no longer talked about.
Before I get into it, it's interesting to hear my colleague just now talk about disavowing white supremacists when in 2022, she spoke at an event led by white supremacist and white nationalist Nick Fuentes, and when asked about it, doubled down on it and said, we're gonna focus on people, not labels. So get out of here with that damn hypocrisy. And Dr. Snyder, I'm gonna give you some time to respond.
First of all, I'd like to thank the representative from Georgia by making clear with her comments and with her person that any discussion of political warfare has to include Russia, Ukraine, and America. She's just demonstrated that point, I think, very powerfully.
Thank you so much, Dr. Snyder. And, you know, this hearing was put together to talk about political warfare, and it's strange because a lot of my Republican colleagues seem to be pointing a lot of fingers, but not at Vladimir Putin and not holding him accountable. I mean, even top-ranking Republicans are having enough of it. Michael McCall said, quote, I think Russian propaganda has made its way into the United States. Unfortunately, it's infected a good chunk of my party's base, unquote. We just heard some of that right now. Republican Michael Turner, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, quote, we see directly coming from Russia attempts to mass communications that there are anti-Ukraine and pro-Russia messages, some of which we even hear being uttered on the House floor. Dr. Snyder, can you talk really quickly about some of the main narratives Russia uses when engaging in political warfare?
I appreciate this question because if we're going to talk about political warfare, we have to take into account the ways that countries cooperate. It's entirely artificial to say, here's China, here's America. That means that we leave aside Xinjiang, at least we leave aside Tibet, Hong Kong, Taiwan, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, all the places where China practices political warfare, and we leave aside Russia and Ukraine, which is where it matters the most. Political warfare is only political warfare if it passes through us. That is the intention. We've just seen an example of it passing through a person. It's only political warfare if it passes through us. What the Russians and the Chinese imitating the Russians try to do is to convince us that our system is no better than theirs, there's no point in voting, and we should support, if we support anyone at all, the person who's most likely to bring our system down. That's the point.
I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that it has to pass through us, because we just heard it here from my colleague, and here's another tweet from the same colleague saying, anyone who votes to fund Ukraine is funding the most corrupt money scheme of any foreign war in our country's history. And if you look at where this is from the Strategic Culture Foundation, an online journal run by a Russian intelligence service that has been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department for election interference. So we see it passing through us, and not just with the colleague that just spoke, but with many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And what Russian propaganda won't tell you is most of the money allocated for Ukraine is actually spent in America. 90% of it going to Americans. And so are these American companies that support Ukraine, are these allegations based on evidence, Dr. Snyder? And if not, where do these allegations against President Zelensky and his cabinet come from?
First of all, U.S. weapons are being used extremely efficiently on the Ukrainian battlefield. They're being audited in practice. Secondly, there is an American institution which does audit the way that is expended. Third of all, you're quite right. What the allocation of usually weapons that are about to be decommissioned anyway to Ukraine means is that we spend more on modern weapons inside the United States, which is why the defense industry is generally in favor of it. This trope of Ukraine being corrupt with respect to the weapons comes from a handful of Russian sources. There's no reason to think it. They're fighting for their lives. They're doing very well.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've got to let that sink in. We have members of the United States Congress using Russian disinformation to discredit Ukraine and help Russia. And I yield back. Thank you.